Welcome back, everyone. Tonight, I'm bringing you 3 deeply unsettling stories from people who work the night shift. That liminal time when the world feels different, when you're awake while everyone else sleeps, when the usual rules don't quite apply. These aren't fictional tales designed to scare you. These are real experiences shared by real people who were just trying to do their jobs when something went terribly wrong. Before we begin, I want to know, have you ever worked a night shift? Are you working one right now? There's something uniquely isolating about those hours between midnight and dawn, and it's in that isolation that the worst things tend to happen. Drop a comment and let me know where you are and what time it is. Knowing these stories are reaching people in the middle of their own night shifts makes them hit differently. Alright, let's dive in. Story 1. The bar that almost became a trap. My name is Cadence, and until recently, I worked the closing shift at a small dive bar in the quieter part of my town. The place sits right off the highway, but the parking lot also has a back entrance that connects to the residential area of town, convenient for locals who don't want to deal with highway traffic. It's nothing fancy. Just a dimly lit spot where the regulars know each other by name, where the jukebox has been cycling through the same classic rock rotation for years, where the pool table has a slight tilt that everyone's learned to account for. Most of our customers are locals, truckers passing through, and the occasional lost tourist looking for a stiff drink in some directions. I genuinely liked the job. The routine was predictable, the tips were surprisingly decent, and I'd learned how to handle the usual bar crowd, the talkers, the flirts, the quiet drinkers, and the ones who just want to be left alone with their thoughts and their whiskey. Weekends were obviously hectic. Packed shoulder to shoulder, music too loud, everyone trying to forget their week. But weekdays? Weekdays were different. During the week, I was expected to work my night shifts completely alone. No coworkers, not even a barback to help me restock or take out trash. It was just me from 9 p.m. until close, which was technically 2 a.m. but often stretched to 3 o'clock depending on when the last customer finally left. The work was easier on weeknights, slower pace, fewer drinks to pour, but I missed the company. I missed having someone to talk to during the dead hours. And more importantly, I missed having backup when things got tense. Because despite the slower pace, we still got our share of problems. Bar fights, aggressive drunks, the occasional creep who couldn't take a hint. That's why I learned to be vigilant, to clock every person who walked through that door and assess them quickly. That's how I noticed him immediately when he walked in. It was sometime after 1 a.m. on a Tuesday, one of those nights where I'd only had maybe 4 customers total, and I was seriously considering closing early. The door opened and a man walked in. If I had to guess, I'd say he was in his late 40s, but he was extremely well-groomed and put together. Not the kind of look you'd expect from a guy his age in a place like ours, especially at this hour. He was wearing a black turtleneck underneath a black trench coat, definitely well-dressed but casual about it in a way that suggested money. Real money. Not the loud, flashy kind, but the quiet confidence that comes from never having to worry about a bill. He glanced around the bar slowly, taking everything in with these sharp, assessing eyes, before walking directly to the bar and taking a seat in the middle. I also remember noticing his posture, unusually straight, almost military. But that detail didn't register as significant at the time. When I walked over, he studied the bottles behind me for a moment and ordered something top shelf without hesitation. As I was pouring his drink, he smiled and asked me if I liked working here. It was a normal enough question, the kind of small talk you get constantly as a bartender. So I answered honestly. Told him yeah, it was a decent gig, made a joke about preferring night shifts because the morning people are always grumpy before their coffee. He laughed at that. A genuine laugh, not the forced politeness you usually get. I wish I could say I got a creepy vibe from him right away, but that's not the energy he was giving off. He genuinely seemed like a stand-up guy, kind of like the friendly single dad at his kid's baseball game who gives the whole team high fives and brings orange slices. He chatted with me for a bit, asking surface-level questions about how long I'd been bartending, what brought me to this town, normal stuff. I didn't mind since the bar was dead quiet and I had nothing else to do. Eventually, he asked me if I'd ever thought about doing something bigger with my life. The question caught me slightly off guard. It was a bit more personal than I expected, but not totally out of line given the context. Bartenders are basically therapists who serve alcohol, so philosophical questions come with the territory. I gave him my standard bartender smile and told him I was happy for now, that I was saving up for school, thinking about my options. He nodded and sipped his drink, looking almost disappointed by my answer. Like he'd been hoping I'd say something different. After a long pause, he asked me what time I got off. That question surprised me more than the others. I hadn't picked up any flirting vibes from him whatsoever. Our conversation had felt friendly and respectful, not like a build-up to asking me out. So I was a little disappointed to discover that this whole interaction had apparently just been another empty attempt at getting my number. I smiled politely and gave him a vague answer, trying to brush him off in a friendly way without seeming uptight or rude. Before he could respond, I busied myself wiping down the counter, creating physical distance. But he didn't press. He didn't try to convince me or make it awkward. He just smiled, like he already knew what my answer would be, then drained the rest of his drink in one smooth motion. He pulled out a crisp $100 bill and laid it gently on the bar like it was nothing. His drink had cost maybe $12. Then, without another word, he stood up and walked out into the night. I stood there for a moment, staring at the bill, trying to make sense of the encounter. The whole thing felt off in a way I couldn't articulate. Not threatening exactly, but wrong somehow. I pocketed the money, finished my closing duties, and went home. I figured I'd never see him again. I was wrong. About a week later he came back. Only this time he wasn't alone. There was a woman with him, and she immediately drew my attention because I'd never seen her before. She looked like she was in her mid-30s and was dressed in a way that didn't quite match her age. Trendy but off, like someone trying a little too hard to blend in with a younger crowd. Everything about her seemed calculated, from the way she smiled too easily to the way she positioned herself at the bar like we were already friends. As I was setting down napkins in front of them, the very first thing she said to me wasn't a greeting or a drink order. It was a compliment. She put on this bright, overly joyful smile and said, "You're so pretty," while her fingers brushed against my arm, lingering just a second too long. I laughed and thanked her, but I could instantly tell something was off about this woman. The man from the previous week didn't speak, which I thought was strange given how talkative he'd been during his first visit. He just sat there watching me with that same assessing look. They ordered drinks, something expensive again, and that's when the questions started flooding in. The woman asked me how long I'd been working here, how old I was, where I was from originally, whether I lived alone, whether I had roommates. Small talk questions on the surface, but the pace and intensity felt like an interrogation. I answered in short, polite sentences, giving away as little information as possible. At one point, the woman looked over at the man, and I swear they communicated something without speaking. Just a glance, but it carried weight. She looked back at me and her smile widened. "I run an exclusive event planning company," she said, leaning in slightly and lowering her voice like she was sharing a secret. "We're always looking for young, fun people to work private parties. You'd be perfect for it." I forced a small laugh. "That's flattering, but I'm pretty happy here." She waved off my response like I hadn't even spoken. "The money's incredible. $10,000 for a weekend. Sometimes more, depending on the event." I blinked. $10,000 was an absurd amount of money, way too much for any legitimate party staff position. "That sounds too good to be true," I said carefully. "It's real," she insisted, her smile never wavering. "Lots of girls like you work for us. It's completely safe, exclusive clientele, really fun atmosphere." She kept using those words, fun, safe, exclusive, like she was reading from a script she'd memorized. Then casually she said, "You should step outside for a second. There's someone in our car who can explain everything better. He handles all the logistics." My pulse kicked up immediately. Everything about this felt wrong. The too good to be true money. The vague job description. The insistence that I go outside to a car to meet some unnamed person. I wasn't playing along anymore. "I'm good," I said firmly, dropping the polite bartender mask. "Not interested." The woman's expression flickered, just for a second, and I saw something cold beneath the friendly exterior. Just then, a group of customers walked in, laughing loudly and heading toward a booth. The woman's demeanor changed instantly. Her smile slipped completely, replaced by something harder and more calculating. She turned to the man beside her, and without another word, they both stood up and left. I was thoroughly unsettled. I told my coworkers and my boss about what happened the next day, and we all agreed to keep an eye out if those people returned. My boss assured me he was always just a 15-minute drive away if I needed him. The bar had security cameras covering most angles, which usually deterred serious trouble. But there wasn't really much else we could do. Those people hadn't technically done anything illegal. I tried to push it out of my head and focus on work. A few nights later, after closing, I saw the car. It was parked across the street from the bar, engine off, just sitting there in the darkness. I tried to tell myself it was nothing, that plenty of cars park on that street. But the feeling of being watched crawled over my skin like static electricity. I walked to my car quickly, keys clutched tight in my hand, trying not to look scared. When I pulled out of the parking lot, I checked my mirrors. The car followed. It stayed back just enough to avoid being obvious, but every turn I made, it was still there, maintaining the same distance, matching my speed exactly. I took a random turn onto a side street that wasn't on my route home. The car followed. Another turn. Still there. My heart was pounding now. I knew it was them. I knew this wasn't a coincidence. I forced myself to stay calm and think clearly. Then, without hesitating, I drove straight to the police station, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. The second I pulled into the station's parking lot, the car behind me sped off, tires squealing slightly as it accelerated away into the night. I sat there for a few minutes, shaking, trying to process what had just happened. Eventually, I went inside and filed a report. The officers took my statement seriously, but without a license plate number or any actual crime committed, there wasn't much they could do beyond documenting the incident. Nothing happened for a while after that. A couple of weeks passed. I started to relax, started to think maybe they'd moved on to easier targets. I was wrong. It was a slow weeknight shift, barely anyone coming in. By midnight, I was seriously considering closing early. That's when the door opened and the woman walked in. Alone this time. I immediately pulled out my phone and texted my boss. She's here. The woman from before. Come now. I tried to keep my expression neutral as I looked up. The woman was staring at me with that same artificial smile, walking slowly toward the bar like she had all the time in the world. I was debating just telling her to leave immediately when she spoke. Thought I'd come check on you, she said pleasantly, like we were old friends catching up. My stomach twisted, but I kept my voice steady. We're about to close. You need to leave. She made a pouty face, tilting her head like a disappointed child. Just one old-fashioned? Come on, it'll only take a minute. I thought about refusing outright, but I figured pouring the drink would stall her long enough for my boss to arrive. So I turned around and started making it, trying to keep my hands from shaking. And then I heard it. The soft, unmistakable click of the front door lock engaging. I whipped around. The woman was gone. The bar stool where she'd been sitting was empty. Through the glass front door, I could see a black van idling in the parking lot, positioned directly in front of the entrance. Panic surged through me. Without thinking, I ran to the front door and made sure it was locked from the inside. She must have locked it on her way out to trap me inside. Then I heard it. Metal rattling from the back door. Someone was trying to force it open. I didn't think. I just moved. I grabbed the heaviest thing within reach, a metal cocktail shaker, and clutched it like a weapon while dialing 911 with my other hand. The dispatcher answered, and I frantically explained what was happening. She told me police were on the way, but I knew they wouldn't get there in time. I was seriously considering making a run for it out the front door when I saw headlights pulling into the parking lot. My boss's truck. The rattling at the back door immediately stopped. A few seconds later, the black van peeled out of the lot with a screech of tires, speeding away into the night. I ran to unlock the front door and practically collapsed into my boss's arms, shaking and crying from the adrenaline crash. When the police arrived, my boss and I reviewed the security footage with them. It was worse than I'd imagined. The cameras had captured everything. Just before the woman left through the front door, two masked figures had crouched down near the entrance, positioning themselves on either side. They were waiting for me to run out in a panic so they could grab me. There was a third person at the back door, the one who'd been pounding and rattling the handle. The plan was clearly to flush me out the front, where the other two were ready. It was a coordinated abduction attempt, planned and executed with terrifying precision. The license plate number my boss had caught from the van turned out to be unregistered, either fake plates or stolen ones. Another dead end. It's been several months since this happened. No arrests have been made. The investigation is ongoing, but without identifiable suspects or a traceable vehicle, there's not much the police can do. The only positive to come out of this nightmare is that my boss doesn't make me work alone anymore. There are always at least 2 people on staff now, even on the slowest weeknights. But I'm still uneasy every time I work a night shift. I still scan every customer who walks through the door, looking for familiar faces. And I still think about the question that haunts me most. How did they know I'd be working alone that night? Someone had been watching me, learning my schedule, planning. And I often think about what would have happened if I'd given in to fear and run out that front door, straight into the arms of the people waiting for me in the dark. Story 2, the men who weren't looking for gas. I used to work the night shift at a gas station convenience store off a quiet stretch of highway about 40 minutes outside the city. Small place, the kind that barely gets any business once the sun goes down. I say used to because after what happened to me a few months ago, I will never work a night shift again. Not at a gas station, not anywhere. Most of my shift was spent restocking shelves, wiping down counters, and occasionally ringing up a trucker or late-night traveler passing through. The hours between 2 o'clock and 5 a.m. were the deadest. Sometimes I'd go an entire hour without seeing a single customer. I remember the night in question vividly. It was just past 2:30 in the morning, and even the usual trucker traffic had dried up completely. I was scrolling mindlessly on my phone trying to stay awake when I decided to step outside for some fresh air. It was cold that night, early November, the kind of cold where you can see your breath hanging in the air. I rubbed my hands together and exhaled a few times, watching the vapor disappear into the darkness. The parking lot was completely empty. Just the gas pumps, the road, and the dark stretch of trees beyond the property line. Even with the highway relatively close, it was eerily quiet out there. No cars passing, no wind, just stillness. I was about to head back inside when I noticed something move out of the corner of my eye. I turned my head and saw a person standing behind one of the gas pumps. My first thought was, how did I not notice him before? He was wearing a dark red hoodie with the hood pulled up, hands shoved deep in his pockets. There wasn't a car anywhere in sight, so he clearly wasn't fueling up. But he also wasn't walking toward the store. He was just standing there, half turned toward the building like he was watching me. At first, I figured maybe he was waiting for someone to pick him up. Maybe his car had broken down nearby and he was waiting for a friend. But something about the way he moved bothered me. He was shuffling in this weird circular pattern, shifting his weight from foot to foot, never quite standing still. It reminded me of how people act when they're nervous or high on something. I went back inside but made sure to keep an eye on him through the glass windows. I watched while pretending to organize the cigarette display behind the counter, hoping someone would drive up and the guy would get in their car and leave. But after several minutes, he started walking toward the entrance. Slow at first, like he was building up courage. Then suddenly he pushed through the door like he'd made up his mind all at once. He walked directly up to the counter but didn't say anything right away. Just stared at me like he was sizing me up or trying to read my reaction. Then, in a rushed, almost rehearsed way, he said his car had broken down just past the highway entrance. He needed a jump or maybe just a little gas to get to the next town. I was genuinely shocked by how unconvincing he sounded. He wasn't even trying to make his story believable. There was no car in sight, no explanation for why he'd been standing behind the gas pump for 10 minutes, no reason he couldn't have just walked into the store immediately if he actually needed help. I offered to call a tow truck for him. No, he said too quickly, shaking his head almost violently. I just need a flashlight. Maybe some help checking under the hood. Something was definitely wrong. The way he spoke, the way he kept glancing at the security monitors behind me, the way his story kept changing slightly, it all felt like a test. But I also started second-guessing myself. People who come into gas stations at this hour are often a little strange. Maybe he was just on drugs or socially awkward or genuinely in a bad situation and terrible at explaining it. I asked him where exactly his car was parked. He pointed vaguely toward the window. Just past the highway entrance. Right before the turn-off. I was skeptical, but then he gestured toward the security monitor behind me. You can see it on the camera, he said. I turned to look at the screen, and to my genuine surprise, there actually was a car visible on one of the exterior cameras. A dark sedan parked in the spot he'd indicated. I thought to myself, oh crap, maybe this guy really does need help and I'm just being paranoid. And that's when it hit me. I had literally just been standing outside less than 5 minutes ago. I'd looked in that exact direction. If there had been a car parked there, I would have seen it. I would have noticed, but there had been nothing. The area had been completely empty, which meant the car had pulled in after I came back inside. Which meant this guy hadn't been stranded. He and whoever was in that car had deliberately parked and then he'd approached the store with a prepared story. I glanced back at the security monitor and that's when I saw it. The slightest movement near the car's rear bumper. Someone was crouching there, just out of the camera's main field of view, trying to stay hidden. A cold wave of dread washed over me. I forced my face into a casual smile and told the guy I'd be happy to help, but I needed to grab my phone from the back office first. He nodded, still watching me carefully. I turned and walked slowly toward the back, trying not to look panicked. The second I was out of his direct line of sight, I slammed my hand down on the emergency panic button hidden under the counter. The alarm went off instantly, a piercing screech that filled the entire store. I expected him to panic, to run, maybe even to attack me. But what he did was so much more unsettling. His nervous energy completely disappeared. No more fidgeting. No more fake urgency. His whole body language shifted. He actually relaxed. And then he smiled. Not a panicked smile. Not an embarrassed, you caught me smile. A slow, knowing grin. Like he had all the time in the world. Like this was amusing to him. I was frozen in shock, unable to process what I was seeing. In one fluid motion he turned and bolted out the door. I ran to the security monitors just in time to see both of them take off, not toward the car but into the woods behind the station, disappearing into the tree line. The car just sat there. Engine off, headlights off, completely abandoned. By the time the police arrived maybe 8 minutes later, both men were long gone. The car remained exactly where it was, doors closed, no one inside. One of the officers walked around the vehicle and then called me over to look at something I hadn't noticed before. The front passenger door was slightly ajar. Not wide open but cracked just enough that someone could have been sitting inside, waiting. There had been a third person. Someone I never saw, someone who stayed hidden the entire time. The police took my statement and had the car towed. They ran the plates, and it turned out the vehicle had been reported stolen nearly a week earlier from over 100 miles away. No one ever came forward to claim it. No reports of missing persons connected to it. No other crimes linked to it. Just an abandoned stolen car in the middle of nowhere, with no explanation. That was months ago and there's still been no resolution. No arrests, no leads, nothing. I quit that job 2 weeks after it happened. I don't care if night shift pays better, I will never put myself in that position again. I don't know what those men were planning. I don't know what would have happened if I'd agreed to go outside and help with the car. But I know it wouldn't have ended well. And I know that somewhere out there, those 3 men are probably still doing the same thing to other people working alone in the middle of the night. Story 3. The woman who knew my name. This happened a couple of weeks ago. I worked the night shift at Walmart, 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., stocking shelves while the store is mostly empty. It's not the worst job in the world, but after a while the nights start to blur together. Same routine, same fluorescent lights humming overhead, same endless aisles that all look identical in the middle of the night. I usually work in the electronics section, which is nice because it's quieter than other areas of the store. People don't exactly rush in at 2 a.m. to buy phone chargers and Bluetooth speakers. Most of my customers at that hour are either insomniacs killing time, truckers grabbing supplies before getting back on the road, or the occasional person who works an even stranger schedule than I do. That's why I noticed him immediately. At first I didn't think much of it. Just another guy wandering the aisles, probably waiting for someone or looking for something specific. But after a few minutes I realized he wasn't shopping. He wasn't even pretending to shop. He just kept appearing. Every time I glanced up from the shelf I was stocking, he was there, lingering in the next aisle over, standing too still by the clearance section, hovering near the display of charging cables. He wasn't looking at products. He wasn't checking prices or reading labels. He was just standing there watching me. I told myself I was overthinking it. The store is huge and maybe he was just taking his time browsing. But the way he moved, always positioning himself just close enough for me to notice, never actually picking anything up or putting anything in a basket, it set off every alarm bell in my head. I kept waiting for him to approach me, to ask for help finding something or to make some awkward attempt at flirting. But he never did. He just watched. And somehow that was worse. I was about to radio for a manager when I felt a hand wrapped firmly around my arm. I nearly jumped out of my skin, spinning around with my heart in my throat. Before I could react or pull away, a woman's voice rang out, loud, friendly, overly familiar. "There you are. I've been looking all over for you." She launched into this elaborate story about how we'd gotten separated after looking at something in the home goods section, how she'd been wandering around trying to find me. Wasn't the store just so confusing at night? I turned to look at her, completely thrown off, and saw a woman I had never seen before in my life. She was smiling brightly, her grip firm on my arm like we were old friends who just reunited after getting separated in a crowd. Before I could say anything, before I could tell her she had the wrong person, she leaned in close and whispered, her tone dropping to something low and urgent. "That guy's been recording you. Follow me." My stomach dropped like a stone. I turned my head slightly, just enough to glance back without being obvious. The man was still there, and now that I was really looking, I could see his phone was out, angled in a way that could definitely be pointed at me. A cold wave of fear washed over me. The woman didn't wait for me to respond. She just started walking, pulling me along with her, keeping up the act the entire time. She rambled loudly about some trip she'd supposedly taken, some inside joke we supposedly shared, her voice bright and casual like we'd known each other for years. I barely processed the words. My thoughts were stuck on him. Had he really been recording me? For how long? And why? I wanted to look back to see if he was following us, but I couldn't make myself turn around. The woman steered me through the aisles, moving quickly but not running, maintaining the appearance that everything was normal. I kept expecting her to drop the act at some point, to let go of my arm and explain what was happening. But she didn't. She just kept pulling me forward, chattering away like we were shopping together. After a minute or so, I finally risked a glance behind us. The man wasn't following anymore. I couldn't see him anywhere. Relief flooded through me and I stopped walking, gently pulling against the woman's grip. "Thank you so much," I said. "I think we're good now. We should probably find a manager and report this." But she didn't let go. If anything, her grip tightened slightly. "He's probably still around somewhere," she said, pulling me forward again. "Let's just make sure we lose him completely." I frowned. "I really think we should get security involved." "Just a little further," she interrupted, her smile still plastered on her face but her eyes not quite matching the expression. That's when I started to realize something was wrong. We'd moved past the main aisles now. Past the registers. Past the self-checkout area. Past the sections that saw the most foot traffic even at night. We were heading toward the back of the store. Toward the warehouse section that was dimly lit and nearly empty at this hour. Beyond that was the side exit, the one employees used for loading shipments. The one that didn't have cameras pointed at it. My heart started pounding for a different reason now. "You can let go," I said, more firmly this time, trying to twist my arm free. "I'm fine. Thanks for helping, but I need to go find my manager." "Come on, just a little further," she insisted, pulling harder. I planted my feet, genuinely yanking my arm back now. "Let go of me," I said loudly. For just a second, her smile faltered. Something cold flickered across her face. That's when I noticed where we were. The side exit was maybe 30 feet away. The hallway leading to it was empty. The warehouse section had no other employees visible. She got me through that door no one would see. I didn't think. I screamed. Loud, piercing, wordless, just pure panic and fury and desperation. The woman's grip loosened in surprise, and I yanked my arm free with all my strength, stumbling backward. I didn't waste a second. I turned and ran toward the front of the store, toward the lights and the cameras and other people. Behind me, I heard the woman shout something. "Wait, come back." And then, impossibly, I heard her say my name. My actual name. The one I hadn't given her. I didn't stop. I kept running until I saw one of my co-workers, Marcus from the grocery section, who was sprinting toward me, probably responding to my scream. "Call security," I gasped. "Right now. There's a woman and a man, they were trying to." Marcus immediately pulled out his radio and called it in. But by the time security arrived and I'd explained everything, both the woman and the man were gone. We reviewed the security footage together and it confirmed my worst suspicions. The woman and the man had entered the store together. They'd arrived in the same vehicle, parked in the same area, walked in at the same time. She'd been with him the entire time. The man's face was crystal clear in several frames, looking directly at cameras, making no attempt to hide. But the woman's face was never fully visible. In every single frame, she was turned away, or her face was obscured by her hair, or she was positioned behind something. It was like she knew exactly where the cameras were and how to avoid them. I had a sinking feeling she was the one who'd planned this whole thing, and I was furious that we didn't have a clear shot of her face. Every second of it had been coordinated. The man's job was to make me uncomfortable, to make me want to get away. The woman's job was to swoop in and rescue me, to gain my trust and lead me somewhere isolated. The police got involved. The whole thing is being investigated as a failed abduction attempt. The man should be easy to identify since his face was caught clearly on camera, but so far no arrests have been made. And the thing that terrifies me most, the thing I can't stop thinking about, is how that woman knew my name. I hadn't been wearing a name tag. I hadn't introduced myself. There's no way she could have known unless they'd been watching me before, learning about me, planning this. I wasn't a random target. I was specifically chosen. I still work at that Walmart, but I requested a schedule change to day shifts. I refuse to work nights anymore. And every time I'm in the store now, I'm looking over my shoulder, scanning faces, wondering if they're still out there. Wondering if they'll try again. 3 night shift workers. 3 close calls. 3 people who survived encounters that could have ended very differently. I want to thank Cadence and the others for sharing their experiences. It takes real courage to revisit these moments and put them out there as a warning to others. If you work a night shift, please be careful. Trust your instincts when something feels wrong. Don't let politeness or fear of seeming paranoid stop you from protecting yourself. Lock your doors. Stay aware of your surroundings. Don't go anywhere isolated with someone you don't know, no matter how helpful they seem. These stories are real. They happen to real people. And they could happen to anyone working alone in the middle of the night. If you found these stories valuable, please like and subscribe. Share them with someone who works nights. And drop a comment telling me about your own experiences. I read every single one. Stay safe out there. Stay vigilant. And remember, the scariest monsters are always the ones that look like ordinary people. Until next time.